You guys like working together? Are you kidding me? She's like family. I've known Anna for 20 years, chat. What the fuck are you talking about? Michael Brooks and how the left should talk about
So
China.
it's very important right now to recognize that there is a bipartisan convergence in terms of a more aggressive stance towards China. Now, are there problems with the Chinese government? Are there legitimate areas of policy dispute? Are there legitimate areas of concern with human rights? No question. But let's be really clear here. The Chinese foreign policy is nothing even remotely on the scale of the aggression and hegemonic influence of the United States. We need to be real about that. Secondly, part of what China's done is evolve economically, which should be the interest and goal of all developing states, and something that most developing states cannot do because of direct US influence through the World Bank and IMF. The Chinese have used their position to support the growth of domestic industries and take advantage of developing its own intellectual properties and technology applications. Why should?
Yeah, I wish Michael was still with us. And I wish that the only time I appeared on a show was not where I was talking about dry jerking or wet jerking. But hey, you know, he could be very serious. He was really good on foreign policy, one of the most solid voices of anti-imperialism, but he was also very funny too. That's very on brand of you. Well, no, Michael Brooks was a very funny person as well. He also had a great humor. Okay?
We have a xenophobic attitude about 5G when they accept the role, which they certainly heavily monitor, of Google, Facebook, and Microsoft. Now, again, if we want to reframe this as a bigger conversation about privacy, data, and openness in general that implicates platform capitalism of Silicon Valley and what the Chinese are developing, well, of course, that's a very serious and important conversation. But it should not be fed in new Cold War terms. And it should not ignore the fact that China is almost always, in international sense, behaving quite rationally as one would expect. Now, China's Asian neighbors have different perceptions. In fact, the Japanese, obviously a close ally of the United States, have been subsidizing and trying to help move production outside of China and move it to other Asian countries. All of these dynamics are complicated and difficult and almost never cleanly represented in the US press. The sort of mainstream Obama narrative is still a kind of more sophisticated version of quote unquote get tough after for decades of essentially treating China as a giant sweatshop. And of course, now we have the new extreme xenophobia of the Trump administration. What we need is an anti-New Cold War, thoughtful analysis that recognizes that China is the world's new superpower. This is a G2 world. What does that mean? What does it mean for the prospects of the global environment? What does it mean for the prospects of workers' rights internationally? And why have we gotten to this world moment where the only conflict in the Chinese relationship in the United States is between the sort of 1% corporate sector that wants to continue on a relationship that has not worked in the main for workers in either country, as well, and then people who want to start a new aggressive hybrid war against China and facilitate a new Cold War. We need to resist both, and we need to have a much more intelligent discourse about one of the most complicated countries on earth.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Just a few points I wanted to mention. You know, there's a lot of tough talk coming from both Democrats and Republicans, as you perfectly pointed out with those two ads, regarding, the new Chinese boogeymen and how we need to really fight them aggressively. But when it really boils down to like the financial aspect, of the relationship we have with China, no one's really interested in doing anything substantive, because while, Democrats might point to the human rights abuses, they absolutely have no problem with the human rights abuses that we're engaging in abroad. So Biden was asked, for instance, what he would do with the Iran sanctions in the middle of this pandemic if he were in charge. He wouldn't lift those sanctions.
Right.
He wouldn't. And those sanctions have led to, countless lives lost in Iran. They're unable to get the medical supplies and medical equipment they need in order to keep their own citizens alive. That is a human rights abuse that we have engaged in. And not only did Trump impose those sanctions and rip up that Iran nuclear deal, I mean, the thinking would be that Biden would step in if he had any power in this situation and lift those sanctions and maybe re-implement the Iran nuclear deal. But he was asked about it and he wouldn't do that. So I think it's important to take that into account. We have a relationship with China because we want their cheap labor. And we have not only suffered from that in our own country when it comes to jobs being lost, but if we focus on the pandemic itself, I mean, we should have a lot of these medical supplies manufactured here in the United States.
Anna has changed so much since this. I don't know what Anna's opinions are on America's foreign policy, but Anna definitely has had an attitude shift on other stuff.
But we don't because it's more profitable for these companies that make these supplies to ship that labor.
I heard she liked some like random reactionary dude being like, Hasan is getting cooked by Jake right now, and she liked the tweet. It's just, I don't know. It's sad. Yeah, really interesting.
Labor abroad. And so, again, sometimes I hesitate to make this argument, but when it comes to like the fundamentals, there are so many similarities between Democrats and Republicans. And I think we need to come to terms with that. And I think you're absolutely right. There's always that citation of human rights abuses when both parties want to garner enough support.
Did you guys like working together? Are you kidding me? She's like family. I've known Anna for 20 years, chat. What the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, of course.
To engage in some sort of, either Cold War or actually full-blown war with a different country. But we do need to really have a moment of self-reflection and see what type of human rights abuses we have in our own country and also abroad.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I also think it's really important, again, to, be real as these things are hyped, that, of course, and I think, to deny that there aren't human rights abuses in China is...
Were you like 12 in 2003? Yes, exactly. Anna's been with the Young Turks for 20 years.
Delusional. To question the rhetoric and deployment of human rights in general is essential. But also, China does not support, China's not engaged in proxy wars across the globe. China's not supporting various factions and civil wars in multiple conflict zones. China's actually a contributor to UN peacekeeper forces. China has certainly seen and perceived itself with some real justification as a kind of productive, sovereign, respecting member of the international system. And I think, as we look at this new rhetoric against China, it's very important to see how the sort of they screwed us, right-wing xenophobia stuff. And then there's the sort of other end of, well, let's talk about how bad they are versus how bad, basically the United States and China is, as an example, if we want to talk about global power relationships, and the fact that the United States is innately more relevant to talk about and understand because it is still by far the most hegemonic and powerful country in the world. It's not a moral statement. That's just reality. That is the ground point of analysis. And I also love what you said, too, which is that if you cede to the Josh Hawleys of the world, this idea of bringing manufacturing back to the United States.
So this guy isn't going to mention China's neocolonialism in Africa. Interesting. Yeah, see, this is what I mean. They immediately, why do we spend the last 30 minutes of this broadcast talking about, and he just covered it too. He just talked about it. Not only did we cover it for 30 to 35 minutes before this video, but he also talked about that. Like, he literally said, China is offering better loan conditions and development no holds barred development, unconditional development to African nations, which is far more favorable to said nations than IMF and World Bank loans. That's it. Like, China also doesn't have hundreds of years of conquest and colonialism and the violent extraction of natural resources that the Western world benefited from and still currently benefits from. Of course, I'm talking about France. So yeah, they're doing an infinitely better job at collaborating with Africa as a smaller partner, but still a partnership rather than a subservient royal subject.
States and strategic industries, which is
so next time you say that, re-examine why that's your immediate response. Okay? What's the point of getting soft power if you don't want to use it to exploit others? I think that there is some level of exploitative trade that will come. And there is. They control the next wave of energy development, given that oil is a finite resource, is going to be renewable energies. Renewable energy, we know, requires a tremendous amount of rare earth minerals that Africa is bountiful with. Okay? China currently controls a big chunk of that. That in and of itself could be considered exploitative, except it's exploitative if those nations are not allowed to do whatever they want with those resources. Okay? If those nations are not allowed to do whatever the fuck they want with those resources, then yes, that is exploitative. Which is why many of the counters against China revolve around hypotheticals of like, what could they do in the future? What if they're way worse than America in the future? What if they're way worse than European nations in the future? But it's never about what they're doing now, because what they're doing now is significantly more favorable for said nations. It's also very paternalistic, patronizing. You know what I mean? To be like, oh, these Africans, they don't know. They don't know what's best for themselves. You know? Very frustrating.
Is going to be a global trend right now. I mean, even Richard Haas from Council on Foreign Relations has acknowledged it. The Japanese are moving very aggressively. Josh Hawley has this legislation specifically on pharmaceuticals and medical supplies. You cannot cede that terrain to the right. And I think this is another way in which the left.
Really fucking simple. China needs resources. Africa has them. They're going for fair trade rather than neocolonialism. China is so far ahead developmentally. They need resources at rates African countries can't produce because they have poor infrastructure. Yeah.
Left needs to have a much more coherent and synchronized conversation, as I always say, about where things can be local, where there needs to be national nation-state projects as the nation-state continues to exist. And then, of course, on the other hand, I'll just end with this. Obviously, dealing with something like Corona is a major area for global governance. And with climate change and oceans and a variety of other issues.
Yeah, chatters that do like Lula Livre memes are who omega lolling this guy. You know what I mean? It's so funny. Another tanky for all of you supposedly, imperial core lefties out there. Another fucking tanky. Yeah. This year, I met this young American, a journalist who turned out to be a friend who I thought that we would meet again. How is it possible? My heart and prayers go to his family and friends. May his passion for social justice be remembered and inspire people around the world. Yeah. Also, Western powers harp on what would they do because they know exactly what they did when poor countries couldn't pay up. Every accusation is just projection, dog. Even before they couldn't pay up, though, like, I think one part of this, yes, Michael, yes, Michael Brooks passed away. So. One thing that Westerners didn't go in giving loans, though. They went in doing genocides first. It's not even that. It's not even just that. You're right about that. They went in with genocides. But also, all of those loans that they offered, okay. When the IMF and World Bank offer loans to developing nations, there are very strict conditions on said loans. Those loans have to be utilized and spent on Western corporations. Okay? Those loans have to be utilized on Western corporations. That's number one. Number two, those loans also mean, which already have like awful conditions to begin with, and paying off those loans are going to be really difficult regardless. Okay? They have to be paid with taxes, and in an effort to extract as many taxes as possible to pay those Western corporations so the money is not cycling back into the economy, into the local economy, they implement incredibly strict austerity measures and forcible privatization of assets. Okay? Who are those assets sold to? Well, back to Western corporations. This is impossible to explain to someone who is American. I will never be able to explain this to you. I come from an IMF country. Okay? So of course, my automatic position from fucking birth is always going to be fuck the IMF. That's the difference. That's one of the major differences. Like, imperialism doesn't just come in the form of direct violence. Okay? Which is why every single Iowa dipshit, social democrat, or anarchist constantly fucking talks about this shit as though it's like direct soft power. It's not soft power. Okay? That's why you fucking walk outside. You take one step outside of the imperial core and you will see motherfuckers have a very different opinion on these sorts of things. Okay? It's neocolonialism. That's the problem. That's why I fucking lose my mind when, again, dumb motherfuckers living in Idaho and Iowa are like, oh, I love the aesthetics of the hammer and sickle. I'm an anarchist. I fucking know, I know what's good. I mean, well, I care about the plight of all of those people who are being colonized and brutalized by China, who's the global hegemonic power, so much worse than everybody else. You simply don't understand it, Hassan. You don't understand the nuances. Your foreign policy is America bad, America bad. Yeah, America is bad, bitch. The fuck you mean? Yeah, America bad. You've never lived a day outside of that structure, so you don't understand it. And Turkey is not a country that has been absolutely fucking ripped to shreds by America, as many of these other countries have. And even then, not having autonomy over your own fucking government is a huge issue. Just put the Life and Debt documentary on repeat and walk away from chat whenever some dipshit chirps. I'm here for it. Yeah. They give you money. They tell you how to spend it. You can only spend it on Western companies. They tell you to reduce social spending, even though your people are suffering because you're a poor company. You haven't industrialized. Why haven't you industrialized? Because you've been colonized. You're a recently post-colonial nation, okay, who needs foreign capital desperately and technology desperately to raise its productive forces, okay? Obviously, that's a necessity at that point. So then they don't let you do that. They only let you spend that money on Western corporations. They don't let you spend any of that money on your own people. They implement rigid austerity protocols. Can you imagine, like, you're a country, your whole ass country, you got millions of people living in there, okay? And the government's like, I want to fucking give some of the natural resources that we are now being able to extract due to foreign capital. I want to take some of those natural resources or the gains from those natural resources and like implement new social programs so that they can live more comfortable lives. And America's like, no, fuck you. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. That's fucking insane. This kind of conversation never gets brought up or is ever even a point of fucking consideration when we talk about Western imperialism. Okay? That's just like a very obvious, in your face lack of fucking control over your own development. So, what the fuck is going on? Yeah, we're back. We're fine. I'm not dead. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Step 5. Kill the HasanAbi broadcast when he starts talking about the IMF or the World Bank. Anyway. Where was I? So then, now you got to pay back those loans and all of the development that you did, all of the refineries that you put together, all the facilities that you built, okay? Well, those aren't your facilities, okay? Those are their facilities. And then on top of that, you can even pay for the top of the hour ad break avoidance fee, which is $5, okay? I love when you say China does that too, which is funny because even American capitalists say Chinese loans are infinitely more favorable. And even the American CIA's very own Voice of America literally fucking has openly admitted that China has actually offered debt relief and dropped 23 separate loans in African countries. 23. Here's the 3-minute ad break now, by the way. There's more. Since the industrial forces are significantly better developed in the Western world, okay, there are also more patents in the Western world. The overwhelming majority of patents, as a matter of fact. Then they don't let you use that technology to save yourself. Except there is one country who didn't give a shit about that and actually baked it in to its manufacturing capabilities and its manufacturing deal that it made with Western capitalists. That country was China, which is why everybody always fucking complains about China stealing American IP. And it's like, Yeah, dude. You know who knew that that was happening? Those who shipped manufacturing to China. Anyway. Yeah, they still manufacture in China. Exactly. Knowing full well that Chinese manufacturers are stealing their patents. They were complaining when they had cheap labor, but all of a sudden IP became an issue. Yeah. I think one of the most solid, one of the most important, one of the most prescient decisions ever made that many orthodox Marxists would consider to be revisionist was the marketization, I guess, or the fake marketization of the Chinese economy that allowed China to fucking creep up and become an intractable, inexpensible, productive force in the world that allowed China to not be ruthlessly butchered by Western capitalists because they were like, this is it. This is our partnership. They're fucking, we got sweatshops. Let's go. That was a super solid move. And that move is the reason why even today we don't just go to war with China. Also, China got lucky that they didn't enforce a lot of austerity on them because they were seen as a counterbalance to the USSR after the Sino-Soviet split. Part of their economic miracle be credited to this as well. What up, Seer? I accept Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. Anyway. So, yeah, I am in awe of that level of even development, urbanization, and evisceration of extreme poverty. Are there still issues? Absolutely. Healthcare is a major problem. Not every single fucking area has the same level of development, certainly. But it's like so stupid to sit here in the United States of America benefiting from the laurels of like the New Deal as like our infrastructure crumbles all around us, as our manufacturing capabilities are entirely around the defense industry, which in and of itself still falls into that same finance capitalist trap that basically sits on top of the government with its tentacles everywhere. And we just like shit on other countries that have done a objectively profoundly good job. So yeah, I don't give a fuck ultimately. Like, yeah, they have a lot of problems in their governance. But I can't even get my own fucking country, who's supposed to be the freest place on the fucking planet, to not criminalize abortion when 75% of my countrymen don't want that to happen. So what the fuck kind of say can I have over Chinese authority? Yeah, sure, they're authoritarian. At least they're fucking building high-speed rail. That's it. So fucking annoying. And then you still have dipshits. They left it to the states. Thank you, Juicer. They left it to the states my ass, dude. They should leave you to the states. Insane. Freest country on the planet happens to have the largest number of prisoners and the largest prisoner per capita. Let's see if you still say the same way about copyright and patent theft when you come face to face with the Chinese Twitch streamer HasanAbi. Wanted to shit on 93% homeownership and 350,000 miles of high-speed rail. Dude, we're on such next level copium. We literally fucking, oh God. We made fun of their ghost cities, okay? It was great for them to just keep building because people kept busy. And then now all of those cities are populated. We made fun of them because these fucking idiots were not building for future demand. Or sorry, they're not building for existing demand and then holding on to the existing inventory in an effort to just keep having this like endless cycle of artificially boosting prices by keeping supply low. Instead, they kept building and building and building, and we made fun of them because they were planning on urbanizing and planning on filling those fucking buildings with people. We made fun of them. And it's not even like, it's the copium is so thick that people still don't know. They still think like China is like the DPRK. They think China is this like completely shut off hermit kingdom or some shit because they want to dull their senses and they refuse to think of a different way of developing. We made fun of them for actually doing something good for their citizens instead of screwing them over for profit. I mean, that in and of itself is identical to another old anti-communist trope, bread lines. Okay? It's the same shit. We got lines too, dumbass. Except we got to pay for the bread. And it's getting increasingly more difficult to do so. At least bread lines are free bread. So it hasn't stopped like that. The anti-communist trope is parts copium and parts fear. Very real fear that someone else might come in and dominate us like we've dominated everyone else. Yeah, even the DPRK is not as bad as they think it is either, but that's a different point for a different day. Not saying that it's good, okay? USSR collapsed and so would China. I think that was the sentiment. Yeah. The fear that I have is that they will take the worst lessons of Chinese control in the Western world. They'll take all of the worst aspects of Chinese governance and apply that here, which we kind of already do, whether it be the social, not a social credit system, but a credit system to begin with, or mass surveillance, which we already have, right? I fear that we will just like beef up all of the mechanisms of control without any of the fucking amenities and just become actually fascist. Also, instead of bailing out the bankers like they did in America, Chinese decided to build the shit out of their infrastructure. Western media shows it as some hidden projects, but their economic advisor were starting this at the same time saying they are going to build the shit out of cities. Yeah. Chinese ghost towns were being built for a better future. Our ghost towns are shells of a forgotten past. Okay? We have ghost towns in America too. Empty malls. Go to Buffalo. Go to Detroit. Go to any fucking town. Go to Ohio. Go to different parts of Ohio. Go to Flint, Michigan. Go to Gary, Indiana. Abandoned. All incredible areas. Go to any fucking city in the Appalachian area. Empty factories. Just housing and fucking development. Left and right. Forgotten. Left behind. Not completely true. China was building to increase GDP on paper. No, that's not correct either. That was another reason, yes, but it also was to inevitably fill those cities, which they did. You're still running on that copium. I don't understand how you can say this when every single one of those motherfucking ghost cities are now filled with like 14 million people, 15 million people. It's crazy. Anyway. So yeah. How could people look around and not see death and devastation all around, and then you see a fucking another country full of people that don't look like us? There is also that white supremacist component to it. These are scary, different looking people with scary, different worldviews. Okay? How could you look at that and not fear, not have this existential angst creep up? Anyway. The fake Paris is still pretty empty. No one, not even in China, want to live in Paris. Sorry to be that guy again, but I guess these shadows are just asking for proof of information on what you're saying. I mean, okay. When I say these cities have developed, what do you want me to show you? Just like go to TikTok. Just TikTok as a product in and of itself, but also just go to TikTok or Twitter to see the very same cities that once were ghost towns and were made fun of, or I don't know, go watch Jake and Bake live. Like, you know, the equivalent of this is like saying, can you please post proof about Chicago being like a vibrant city? Like you're asking me to post proof like here. I've shown this before, but I guess it's good to show it again. What's the fucking city that's like the one where the train goes through the fucking the apartment building?